Welcome everyone for the third in our series of COSBOA Roundtable Communique podcasts, proudly brought to you by the Commonwealth Bank. It's an opportunity to seek and look into the inner workings of the Council of Small Business Organisations Australia. We are, of course, the peak body for small business advocacy here, generally at the federal level, but right now we seem to be playing at the state level as well. Each month at an open forum roundtable, we bring together our members, the professional associations, which collectively represent over 800,000 small businesses, plus key stakeholders like the ATO, Treasury, heads of government and regulatory bodies to discuss what's happening in the small business ecosystem. In these podcasts, we'll chat you through what's been discussed by our members, what's been presented to us by government partners, and how we are advocating for small businesses out there. So welcome today again, Matthew. It's lovely to chat to you about what is a really important part of COSBOA's communication with their members and communication with government. I'm always intrigued to hear about the different developing thoughts and what our professional associations are really go through. And I love unpacking this with you because it's fascinating to hear a little bit about what the take is and how maybe some things have evolved in the few days between when we have the roundtable and this discussion now. Now, in this, first of all, hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you for taking a breath.
Yes.
Welcome. Yes. Welcome to you. Welcome to the members and listeners. And yeah, look, this roundtable, we took it in a couple of different directions, which I found was interesting, of trying to get some real feedback about members of positive experiences from the last 18 months. Because what I'm seeing around the place is a fair bit of fatigue, a fair bit of tiredness. The rate of change has been enormous. The rate of interpretation has been enormous. Federally, state-wise, organisations and our members and their members trying to interpret what's going on. And it has been great that the governments have been wanting to engage and wanting to consult, but it's just been such a period of rapid consultation. And as we all know, some states are doing more consultation than some others. But and we have different states in different places, Alexi. We know Victoria and New South Wales have been very hot to trot in the middle of lockdown, and other states are not in lockdown. So they're different sorts of discussions.
Yeah, and as we speak right now, like I think was in the last half hour to an hour, Tasmania's just announced a snap 3-day lockdown. So, fingers crossed for them that they get on top of those numbers and that doesn't expand to a snap lockdown that goes for, what's Victoria in now? Week 8 of a 1-week lockdown?
People keep telling me it's more than 250 days and I just don't want to think about it anymore.
No, I think everyone's stopped counting generally. And, that's why we were looking at trying to keep things a little bit positive. There have been some positives for our members. Interestingly, when we looked at the polls talking about simply membership within their professional associations, they've seen an increase. Over 67% of our members have actually seen an increase in the number, which is great. It means that the voice of professional associations is really meaningful, if nothing else but to help their members to unpack the support measures and the restrictions that small businesses need to get their head around. But if anything, I don't know, you're a head of a professional association. Has that meant better engagement as well as an increase in the numbers who have joined, Matthew?
Yeah, so in our space, the bookkeeping association professionals, and I'm hearing it from the accounting bodies and like-minded associations, but we also heard in our members roundtable from the industry-based associations, where it's more industry, that there is a stronger connection of members to the association. The associations have got their understanding across their industry or across their profession, and so we can consolidate the concerns and the voices and speak to government with one voice or one set of concerns and try and do that interpretation for the respective industries. But as you were alluding to, Alexi, each of the members indicated stronger connection with the members, greater communication both in and out with the membership, and most members indicated that their membership had gone up during the COVID period, that membership had certainly increased. That's not 100%, but it's about 2/3 of the members indicated stronger membership numbers as a result of the work that was being done during COVID.
And they also mentioned through discussions and through the polling that they've seen an improved communication in both ways with government and regulators, as a result of COVID. If anything, it's, I think, developed those relationships. And they've also seen demonstrations of resilience and adaptability. And isn't that great to see almost a mentoring capacity happening within organisations where there's talk of what's been really positive during COVID and supporting one another through social media channels or just building up those relationships between members. And that's something that 83% of our members have seen as well. What I found quite interesting is the lowest point was unleashed creativity and problem solving. Clearly, small businesses are not in that mental health space where they're being particularly creative, or it's really just, a duck with legs swimming underwater trying to maintain the status quo and keep themselves afloat. And that's obviously being reflected by our member organisations as well. So yeah, it was nice to talk about something positive. You're absolutely right. So the next thing we had was we had our usual open discussion about issues and concerns. We were able to give some good updates, particularly from New South Wales and their roadmap. They're continually drip feeding information, which in a way can be a little bit difficult to unpack constantly. Like you mentioned, we're doing that almost on an hourly basis, if not a daily one. But a really good positive from COSBOA was we've been calling for some collateral to come out from the government to provide to small businesses, and something that it's not just a single option, but lots of different options to put up in different places around your space, your small business space. And that's been a positive. And we've also had a really great success with tailored support. Can you explain a little bit about what's happening in that space with, I know that the New South Wales government is doing stuff with food spoilage as an example, offering tailored support.
Yeah, you talked about the information being drip fed, and I just want to put a real positive spin on that, because, and it's not spin, but a positive take on that, is that some of that is because the journey has developed and the understanding has developed. So the government would table something or table a concept. We would ask more questions or clarify as COSBOA or the associations, and government would go, oh yeah, need to develop that a bit further, need to think a bit further. But the tailored support you're talking about, Alexi, we have all been trying to predict what's going to happen. What's going to happen next week or the week after? Will a segment, a local government area, go into lockdown again? Despite vaccination rates, what will happen? And for a long time, we've spoken about small business needs certainty. Well, it was really pleasing to see the New South Wales government come out with tailored support, where they said if your business is subject to a lockdown going forward or a series of restrictions and you've got to throw out stock or you lose stock as a result, there's a support program now in place. Both New South Wales have, I'll call it a gap filler grant, where they're going, you've fallen through the gaps, talk to us. You might get into that particular sort of hardship funds. And Victoria have got that gap filler sort of grant in place as well. So tailored support where we have been calling for government to think about what are we going to do for the small business that doesn't bounce back just because you've said we're open, or the industry that takes 3 to 6 months to bounce back while their custom builds again, because consumer confidence is going to have to build again in some areas. And it's good to see that starting to happen, and we're looking for a bit more of it.
And I suppose the really big question that's still unanswered is around what happens when you have a positive case come in through your doors. We still haven't had enough time passed to really see what that looks like. We're still seeking that information just to have some real clarity about what small businesses can expect when it comes to testing, isolating, knowing how long you need to quarantine your workers for, how many of those workers, what proportion. It is obviously a complex issue and lots of different parameters to unpack, not to mention the fact that small businesses have lots of different ways of operating and number of employees, etc. Is that something that COSBOA is going to continue to work with the government to get some clearer answers on?
You know this as well as I do, Alexi. We are sitting here still with questions. I look at some of that journey New South Wales has taken us on, and they've issued some great risk rating charts where a business can know if it's a close contact, here's the definition, here's the consequence. But we're not quite there. We're not quite at the end of this story of knowing exactly what it is. As I sit here, I'm waiting to see the Victorian announcement. I understood there was a whole lot of vaccination material due out today. What is their roadmap for, in a vaccinated world and a slightly more open world, what's the consequence if you have a positive COVID contact into your business premises? What's the way forward? How long are we locked down? Do we lose a worker? And Alexi, coming out of the roundtable and coming out of discussions since, it's that workforce that we're hearing is a significant issue. We're hearing shifts between not just businesses, but whole industries are losing workers to other industries because the environment is a little bit better over there, or the demand for worker is greater, so they're actually paying differently or paying more. So the casual worker is going, I'll go over there because I earn more per hour.
Yeah, I was speaking to a small business owner on the weekend where they said, he runs two businesses. He's doing the barista work himself because the baristas who he can't re-employ because he's already lost them because they've been, and this is in the northern beaches of Sydney, so they've been particularly badly affected. He's basically working for 70-hour weeks as a business owner. He's got one employee. He's not opening up the restaurant full time, and it all comes down to that accessibility of workers. And not only you mentioned the movement of workers between industries, but a fear of some people not wanting to go back to that work because of the risk that you're taking. Your frontline staff, you're the one who's exposed to more members of the public. So there's quite a lot of issues there. And what I heard from this small business owner is that it's not really going to be solved until we open the borders and we start to replenish that those workers and getting them back into the country. Is that the biggest piece of the puzzle to fix it, do you think?
I think it's a piece of the puzzle. I think watching the workforce and the trends in workforce, the trends in employment are going to be different state to state as well. I think it's going to be different based on the restrictions and the vaccination rates and the vaccination rate responses of the respective states. I think it's going to be a very interesting job force market and seeking employee market for the next period of time.
Thank you. Yeah, it's certainly interesting that the realm in which we can operate and work with in terms of advocacy is an interesting one, and it's good to be able to advocate for our members, not only for industry-specific issues, but also for small businesses as a whole. Now, the next part of our roundtable, we had a speaker come in who unpacked the situation that's currently in the courts about insurance. And just before we go through what she explained, I thought it'd be interesting. I was quite surprised by our polls about insurance. I know that when I started the work here in June, I felt that insurance was going to be the major issue, the big thing bubbling to the surface. And what our members have said, and well, basically what's happening in terms of what's important right now, that's not the case. We asked our members, are your members having problems accessing insurance? The vast majority, 73%, said no, and it's a few, 27% said they can access, but cost is a problem. And then generally they said rate the problem of insurance access for your industry, and most of them said it was about normal. So the access to insurance, largely as far as our members are concerned, is fairly nothing abnormal happening here. But there are issues bubbling up to the surface. So I wonder whether or not it's just something that small businesses haven't got a chance to unpack yet. They haven't turned their mind to it as yet. So we had a guest speaker, Sophie Woodward, come and talk to us about test cases around business interruption insurance that have been caused by COVID-19. So the business interruption that can be clearly linked with COVID-19 and the insurers not paying out on that, on those claims in the High Court. The findings from the first test case had been handed down and the second case was underway. Now, she unpacked for us what it meant for small businesses in Australia. What were your thoughts during that presentation, Matthew?
Look, for me, it very much came down to, Alexi, it's great there's a test case out there. It's great that it's working out and we're going to get to a position of being informed about what the world is. That second case, I believe, was decided and appealed within seconds. So it is going to the next level, as Sophie indicated. To your earlier comments, Alexia, I do think small business are not considering this the top issue with them right at the moment. They haven't looked to go to their business interruption policies to seek compensation because of COVID yet. But should some of the certainty come to the fore, should some of the definitions about what's going on in our space for insurance claims, I think small business will get a little bit more interested. Right now, they're trying to work out how to be open, whether there is government support. To go into a detailed, complex insurance claim is just a little bit beyond them at the moment, I think. So It's an early topic. I'm with you. 6 months ago, I think we were all going, we weren't going to find any insurance. The prices were going to go nuts. But it appears the market has just rolled along. But the response to COVID and COVID claims, it'll be interesting to see what wording comes into policies and new policies and renewal of policies, and whether businesses will be able to insure for pandemic-like events going forward. They're the questions that I'll be watching for the insurance industry.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And also businesses haven't had the opportunity to assess what their losses have been. And we know that a lot of them are still in the process of taking stock. You as a bookkeeper would know that, we're at the point where maybe now they're starting to look at their September BAS and that'll give them a bit more of a financial understanding. But it's all wrapped up with what the other risks are in terms of COVID as well, and making sure they're mitigating risks. I'd be interested to see how policies change when it comes to not just about putting locks on the door now, but putting locks on the door of entry to customers who are COVID positive. It's a whole new world for so many different elements of running a business, I think. But yeah, I take your point. It's something that it's not on the forefront of small businesses' mind right now, but definitely something COSBOA will keep an eye on. And then I guess the last thing, which I found a little bit interesting, was talking to our members about how they felt about supporting through the reopening of the economy and what that support looks like. And COSBOA, since it's with its reopening proposal document, the Rebuilder proposal, we've been talking about a couple of different ways we'd like the government to investigate. One option is, of course, having a BAS relief and a BAS forgiveness, potentially with having a refund mechanism there to encourage people to sell in the next couple of quarters. We've heard a little bit of things about that, but we were interested to see from our members, would they prefer to see a BAS forgiveness or a BAS relief, or would they like to see a debt mechanism like a time to recover loan offered by the government, given all the debt that small businesses have accumulated? It was quite interesting to see the vast majority of them said they would rather see that mechanism come in the BAS. Why do you think that would be for small businesses?
I think that's a no-brainer, Alexi. BAS forgiveness is forgiveness, whereas the time to recover or revenue contingent loan, it's still a debt to be paid at some point. And I think that's what business are quite concerned about, is they don't want their debt levels just climbing. So, commercial tenancy relief schemes, there's some rent on hold, there's some other things, tax office debts might be accumulating. Well, the debt book is just increasing. Even a revenue contingent loan is an increase in that debt book. At some point, it's got to be paid, which is where COSBOA's brainstorming came up with the BAS forgiveness concept. Look at a BAS, be it September's, be it December's, and relieve, whether it's just the GST component or the POIGW component. But that was the concept put before government to go, maybe this is the way you support the future cash flow of business so they can use that cash, reinvest in their business and move forward. The increasing debt book, I think, is a concern to many.
Not to mention the positive part of the BAS is it's a mechanism that small businesses are already comfortable with and understand. It's not another grant process or another thing or another report that you need to run and unpack. I'm sure the software companies would be quite pleased with not having to input another report mechanism into their software as well, that's for sure. Well, look, thanks for joining me once again, Matthew. It's been fascinating again to unpack what our members have said. Now, remember, everybody, this is a currently free to anyone offer available to anyone, and the roundtable discussions are open to all of our members. We definitely encourage you to come and take part. It helps to feed our policy and our advocacy positions to hear from you. And we've got such great engagement with our members when they come on that roundtable as well. They're very keen to share their experiences, and fascinating to see how many of those experiences are shared across different industries, which is really great to see. So look, thanks again, Matthew, for joining me.
Thanks, Alexi, and thanks all for having a listen.
And we'll all catch up with you again next month. Don't forget, if you've got any burning questions or anything we can help you with, we're just an email or a phone call away, and give us a call and see if we can help. Thanks again, Matthew, and we'll see you all next month. This year, the Commonwealth Bank is proud to partner with the Council of Small Business Organisations Australia to bring you this series of insightful podcasts. Each month, regulators, advocates and Corporate Australia and COSBOA's Industry Association members hold roundtables to work together to fight for small businesses. Get the inside story on what's happening to protect and promote small business in Australia as it happens. Well, welcome everybody. We have a special add-on to our Communique podcast here for the COSBOA Roundtables. I'm very pleased to be joined by Laura Kirby, who's the Chief Mental Health Officer for Commonwealth Bank, who are, of course, our sponsors for this series. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, it's great to discuss a very important issue. And after a few weeks of, or I should say months of quite a heavy discussions around, money and how small businesses are doing and how dire the consequences are for them, we're finally at the point where we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about positivity. And what I wanted to get from you was an understanding about how a big company like Commonwealth Bank handles positivity within their ranks, and what do you do to try and keep up the positivity for your executives and your workers and everybody in between?
A great question. I think one of the really important things that the bank has done over the last probably 3 to 4 months in particular is really recognise the importance of specifically mental health and wellbeing, and really put that at the forefront, and remember that fundamentally at the end of the day we're all humans and we've all been through a really difficult time. So to come together and be able to acknowledge just how important and how much of a priority our wellbeing is, and really put some solid services behind that. So there was some great work done particularly within my area, in offering wellbeing services, giving people additional tools to support themselves over this time, look at the way that they might need to pivot on self-care and how they look after themselves when in a lockdown or working from home, or where they've had protracted periods of time where they've been away from loved ones or friends. So that ability to really focus on the importance of mental health and wellbeing, I think, has been an enormously positive contribution, and I think a really positive silver lining to have come out of the last 12 to 18 plus months, and just remind people really what's important, and fundamentally the fact that we're upright and looking after ourselves and prioritising our wellbeing is key.
So with our members being professional associations, they have to deal with really disgruntled, stressed out businesses. And I guess that really takes its toll. And while I think about it, that wouldn't be too different from how those in the banking industry have to deal with stressed out people as well. So what's the advice? What's the advice that you give your professionals within the Commonwealth Bank about how they can, like you said, self-care, but handle situations that are not always positive?
Look, I think empathy is key here, and this is something not just for our frontline staff, but all employees, and recognising that everyone's doing it tough. Everyone's going through a time that is completely unprecedented and then that we're not built for or prepared for. And so in that vein, remembering, or at least the analogy that I use is we're all in the same storm, but every one of us is in a different kind of boat, and some of us are in dinghies some days. And so being able to just keep that at the forefront and respond with empathy, and there's a whole lot of, technical skills around depersonalization and disconnecting after a really challenging call. But if we can stay live and be empathetic and remember that first, and that's really important. I think interestingly, noting the scenario you just mentioned around that constant dealing with, people who are frustrated or in distress. One of the other things that we have noted over this time is a real sense of empathy fatigue. So it's really trying to balance that sense of empathy with knowing when to switch the empathy off and put back into some of our own fuel and resources before we switch on to the next one. So there's been some real development around managing empathy fatigue that's been really important over this period of time as well.
And that management of empathy fatigue, is it more about finding a line in the sand where you switch off and say, right now it's time to look after myself because I was just looking after someone else really intensive? Is it as simple as that?
Look, in many ways, yes. And I tend to use the phrase boundaries. I think there's two kinds of that, though. There's the end of the day when we have the ability to properly leave it behind, switch off, and have a really long period of time of looking after ourselves, disconnecting from work, reconnecting with what's important for us, giving ourselves time to look after ourselves. But there's also some of those micro moments of self-care in the day, which doesn't necessarily require us to completely switch off for a long period of time, because when you're talking about dealing with customers, you're often hanging in contact center context, hanging up from one, picking up the next. So it's using those small transition moments to take a deep breath, self-regulate, disconnect from the last one, switch on to the next one. So there is, whilst it sounds simple, there is definitely a skill and art to perfecting that ability to quickly activate those boundaries, quickly activate that self-regulation so that we can maintain good levels of energy and minimize the risk of empathy fatigue during the day as well.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking of breathing in between.
Correct.
How important that is. I mean, it's not simple, yet it is simple, but it is so important to find that balance. Look, lastly, I just wanted to ask you a question about what I guess the Commonwealth Bank is feeling about sentiments in general. Do you feel as though things are lifting up, that people are looking towards the future? Are things turning into more positive light?
1000%. And actually, it's very interesting this timing. I think we'll see some refreshed messaging from the bank very shortly. But as part of that refreshed messaging, there is an incredible sense of optimism and the sense of a brighter future and the ways in which we can contribute to that. So there is definitely a sense that we think we're past the worst, and now it's time to look at how do we continue to build or rebuild in some cases. What does that look like? What does everyone's future look like, and how do we positively contribute to that? There is a huge sense of optimism and positivity attached to that.
And now I think we can all breathe a collective sigh of relief having heard you say that. Look, thank you so much, Laura, for joining us here at the COSBOA Communicate podcast. Laura Kirby is the Chief Mental Health Officer for the Commonwealth Bank. Thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And we're out. Thank you.
Beautiful.
That was super efficient.
Done.
Look at that. 2 women in a room getting stuff done. Bang, just do it.
There's definitely a gender thing there.
Totally. Yeah, totally. Like the total empathy, like we're just going to get this done. We need to do that. We need to talk about that. Done. God, we would have been stuffing around if we'd had the entire marketing team with us. Thank you, Laura. That's great. We'll bump that in, and I'll make sure we tag you in LinkedIn and do all the tags, etc. Make sure Stephen's happy. Awesome.
Good. Thank you so much. Lovely
Thanks.
talking with you.
Enjoy your day. Bye.